Microphone to do that, don't I? Thanks for hanging out, guys. Welcome to the PiG Daily. It's episode number 46, and today we're going to be looking at True's ZvP. Specifically, let's block some Protoss hatcheries. Let's put our own hatchery down on 14 supply and basically just do weird stuff which no one else does and seems to make no sense at face value. Yeah, what the hell? True does weird stuff. His ZvP is strange, and everything went according to plan at WCS Summer. So today isn't the longest episode. We don't get to necessarily see too many games where things go wildly wrong, but we do get to look at hatch blocking in ZvP. We get to look at the weird sort of opening that True does, and a few of the fundamental points which make it a very interesting style. And just generally continuing this theme of True making his opponents uncomfortable and trying to force mistakes. And I think this is a really smart way that True plays because ZvP is quite hard right now for Zerg players at the top pro level. It's something where players are struggling to play in the mid game and even later than then. There's a few kind of guys like Nurchio and Dark who are capable of winning in that mid game and late game even sometimes. But for the vast majority of players, they're really struggling at those stages. It's all about finding a weakness in the Protoss armor and stopping the Protoss from kind of streamlining their build and just going straight on upwards, with the minimal defense while pressuring the Zerg. And True kind of finds a way here to throw the Protoss off balance. So let's dive into game and let's take a look at it. All right. So we are going to be using our nice classic overlay here for this today. Let me just move that. I'll just get rid of that overlay just for now. Okay, here we go. Alright guys, so True spawning down here in the bottom right on Frozen Temple. Now first things first, 14 supply hatchery. What? True is just a madman. Now this is actually a really clever sort of meta adjustment based on the fact that almost all the Protoss players at the moment are sending an early probe, especially in Europe. All the European Protoss players are doing this. After their pylon, they immediately send the probe across the map on two-player maps, and they go and try to block that natural with a pylon. By putting the hatchery down on 14 supply, True can completely deny that. So we'll see True do this, not just when he's planning to do a hatch block afterwards, but also he'll do a 14 or 15 hatch in ZvT on maps like Dasan Station so that he can get out early queens and zerglings while still getting a hatchery down on the gold. He'll take the hatchery this early on Frost in case the probe does scout him first and have a chance to scout, even when he has no kind of thoughts behind hatch blocking at all or anything like that. So it is pretty cool. Just kind of going away from the standard opening in terms of everyone says you should be going 17 hatch. Everyone says you should be going like 17 hatch, 18 gas, 17 pool or something like that for the most part. And True here also goes for a hatch block very early on. So this is something he used over and over again in his EVPs. Now, keep in mind at this point, he's got enough money to put that hatchery down before the gateway finishes. Plonks that down. Let's go back just a little bit more. So notice at home, he has actually built more drones. So let's go back further. Let's go back to when that drone first arrives. Because I want to see, here we go. So yeah, so even as this drone's heading across the map, he is actually building a few more workers. Now in some of his games, True doesn't build those workers straight away. Now I'm not sure if that's a reaction to the probe being in his mineral line, but something he might have been thinking is, look, if there's a probe here, from Wellmu's point of view, if Wellmu just sees lava sitting there, he might freak out a little bit and be like, whoa, what the hell are you doing, right? So as the Overlord pops instead, Wellmu sees eggs immediately turn into drones, and he can say to himself, oh, okay, that's cool. You're just doing, what seems like a reasonably normal build, just a faster hatchery. However, in some of his games, he would delay one or two of those drones, and sometimes even send this drone across slightly faster to ensure he would get the hatch block down. Ooh, sorry guys, I forgot to turn off my follow notifications. I'll turn those ones off so that we don't have Arnie interrupting this show for the next hour, or next 20 minutes or so. We're going to do another short show today. We're going to stick with that shorter format. Yeah, so sometimes he would get here a bit earlier to try and ensure he could get that hatchery down. So there's a lot of tiny adjustments here. True, sometimes I feel like he does things by feel, but a lot of the time there is a rhyme and a reason to it. And of course, you're always going to beat a probe in a one-on-one fight because a drone instantly regenerates 1 life, while the probe will only regenerate outside of combat, those shields. And just getting this hatchery down, and notice this is 3 hatch before pool, and behind this, just adding more drones, a gas, and a spawning pool. And the goal with this hatchery is, it's very interesting. It's all about throwing the Protoss off their build. This is not to win the game. There isn't really any time you're going to build a roach warren and pump roaches out here. It's not going to work. Why? Because the cybercore's almost finished. There's pylons already next to it. You've got a zealot out already. Pylon cannon's going to go down. It's just, it doesn't make sense. It would be a huge investment, and if the Protoss just pulls workers, build some units, they're going to shut it down. But what you're doing here is you're forcing the Protoss into uncharted territory. And that is what I find very interesting, is if you're having a tough time in a matchup, it's really difficult. What is one of the best ways to win? It's you throw your opponent out of their comfort zone. You put pressure on them to make mistakes. And especially because Protoss players at the moment, especially in the European scene, very focused around going straight for Twilight Council, straight for the glaive upgrade for the adept attack speed, hitting these very sharp pressures across the maps, often following up with like a faster mortal push or a blink push, and really kind of keeping the pressure on the Zerg. And the thing is, their builds are designed to be safe against everything, as long as they do it perfectly like that. And like, it's really towing that line of greed where they get the fast third, they get the nice defense up, and they also have built-in scouting with their pressures. The moment you throw them off balance, the Protoss build becomes much more difficult to ascertain, wait, okay, how much did the Zerg really commit to this? When can I push? When is it a good time to push now? Suddenly the Protoss has to make all these calculations on the spot. And you can imagine here, whether it's Wellmu, Harstem, whoever, they've probably played these certain builds hundreds of times. They've never had their hatch blocked since Heart of the Swarm, or maybe not since the beta. And immediately all of that goes out the window, and they've got to play a scenario they've practiced 5 times or 10 times, like in their whole Legacy of the Void practice, as opposed to hundreds of games doing the same type pressure. So suddenly you're opening up opportunities for your opponent to screw up, but you're also opening up a lot of chances for them to just miss scouting information or to not calculate how they should adjust their build just right. So this is really cool because True's very aggressive. So simply by throwing his opponents off balance a little bit, it gives him much more leeway to get damage done later on in the game. Whoa. All right. So like I said, he's just droning up behind this. Pretty standard stuff. Starts getting 2 queens when he can. And because he doesn't want to waste the money, and his hatchery was already very low, quickly cancels the hatchery and immediately puts this Evo chamber down. And that's something you need to be very fast to do. Don't do that if you're playing... You might not be able to pull this off if you're playing cross-server, because there's like a patch of creep underneath the hatchery for like half a second, but not just that. The Protoss player, if he realizes this is an option, what he should be doing is he should be getting ready, and the moment he sees the hatch cancel, or when the hatch is getting very low, he should be spamming one of these units, move commanding it, so that the moment the building's gone, the unit moves in and actually blocks it. Because otherwise, the thing is, people often think the units will move in automatically. Well, the building's dead, surely they'll go for the drone in the center. No, because they've usually just finished an attack or just started an attack. If you've ever told a unit to just right-click on an enemy unit, you'll notice it won't follow it. It'll like walk up to it, it'll kind of like hit it, it'll go like slap slap, and then it'll wait till the unit's like a full space and a half away before it's like, oh, you're out of range, I want to do my next attack, I better start chasing you now. So the Protoss really needs to micro that in there in order to deny this. Wellmu missed it this game. I don't know if you've got 2 players fully focusing on doing it at the exact same time, if the Zerg can ever get the Evo chamber down, or maybe if the Zerg does it perfectly, there's just like literally no window for the Protoss to block it. I'm pretty sure if the Protoss is spamming in there, they should be able to block it every single time. All right, gets the Evo chamber down, just going to keep buying as much time as possible. Back at home, droning on up, actually uses an extractor trick here on 28 because Overlords are a little bit late. And realizes immediately that he has to build Zerglings. Now, why does he have to build Zerglings? And this is where True starts to adapt to everything that's gone on. He saw that Wellmu said, well, if I can't put my Nexus down, I need more units, which will help clear the hatchery, which will help me be safe, but it also allows me to use my money to put pressure on. So he immediately says, well, let's just start making lots of adepts. Let's go across this map and be really annoying. But True here, good Zergling positioning, Queen at the front, and just very safe play here. Gets the Zerglings out and starts heading to take that third. And the 4 Adepts and the Zealot, you know, they forced out only 14 Zerglings. Not that great for Wellmu. Third base is already underway. You know, the natural's not even finished here for Wellmu. But overall in the work account, Wellmu's quite healthy. 27 probes versus 24 drones. Zergling speed isn't even done. This is, you know, not the worst situation for Protoss, but it comes back to what we were talking about before. He's thrown it just into a little bit of an awkward scenario. Everything's going to be timed out slightly different. This glaive upgrade is finally starting, but even with the inherent delays of dealing with the hatchery and getting delayed at Nexus, this is a very late Twilight Council resonating glaives upgrade. This is not down that early. I feel like Wellmu really did want to get that down a bit faster. We see him also going for DTs in the back. Likewise, these DTs, I feel like, could probably be a little bit sooner. So let's fast forward a little bit and let's take a look. Now, from here, there's a few things you can see about True's game plan. He always uses this pack of speedlings to try and, you know, block the third as much as possible, kind of deny scouting, all that sort of stuff. This probe here comes dangerously close to seeing very important information, which is all these roaches coming out, but doesn't quite see that. And what True almost always does every game is he goes crazy aggressive. He's just like, I'm just going to try and kill your third, because he doesn't want to play that mid-game stage. He doesn't want to let the Protoss get in that element. So his early aggression with the hatchery throws the Protoss off. He then follows that up with another wave, whether it be a big Ling Bane or a big Roachling attack. And this can allow him to force more mistakes to do more damage. We see here Wellmu not watching with his shades, accidentally shading on top of roaches, which is quite disastrous. Losing 2 or 3 Adepts pretty quickly. And even though these Adepts are going to start to do decently versus these Zerglings, there's only 5 of them left now. 5 Adepts, all damaged. Going to get overwhelmed by those Speedlings. And let's fast forward, show you guys how this happens. DTs come out. True has absolutely no answer. Runs home, is like, oh god, what do I do? Starts to counterattack with his Zerglings, knowing that they're not going to help. His roaches will be enough to defend. And then he realizes, wait, you're just going for the third. You know what? I can just use the minimal defense at my natural, and let's try and do counter damage. If you've got DTs this early, you probably don't have a lot of stuff. And this is something you see True do every single time his back is up against the wall. He very quickly makes a snap judgment of, let's not try and fight this front on because I can't win there, or I will always fall behind if I fight it front on, and he will go for the counter attack every single time. And this has won him multiple games in this tournament. There was another game against Wellmu on Frost where he was actually looking like he took way too much damage to some early Adept pressure, and then he just counter-attacked with his Zerglings while the Adepts were still in his base, and there was nothing in Wellmu's wall, and he just won the game with about 15-20 Zerglings counter-attacking. And this is something, you know, right there, True, sniping that Nexus is so good. That puts him in such a great position. It really was just DTs out for Wellmu after those resonating glaives finished. And from here, True's in a fantastic position. I would say it's not necessarily game over as such, but you've got a lair finished. You've got OV speed on the way. I mean, there's no upgrades, but just generally, 57 drones, 3 hatches, 4th base on the way versus a 3rd Nexus just starting. It's almost game over at this point. And I know a lot of people watching this probably had the same sort of feeling which I had, which is like, this is kind of gimmicky, this is a bit crazy at first. I just thought, like, how does this work? This is insane. Because this sort of stuff worked over and over and over again. But like I said, it comes back to forcing these mistakes out of your opponents. But not just that, their build will never be as crisp, because suddenly they're locked in. Remember, in this early game, Wellmu wasn't necessarily sure if there was going to be some crazy all-in. He poked with the Adepts and the Zealot, and then he was like, nah, I just got to go home, because if these get surrounded, then I'm in a really bad position. I don't know if True's just massing Lings, and then he's going to counter-roll in. Suddenly the Protoss loses so much information. So let's go back a little bit, and I want to watch this through Wellmu's eyes, and I want to show you guys the effect it has on the Protoss decision-making to play this aggressive and to do this. So let's watch from Wellmu's point of view. Like I said, he had to pull back with that early pressure. So let's put this on Wellmu's camera here, and he's just kind of chilling. He's like, alright, let's get glaives. Let's send a Stalker up. And he's blind on the map. He doesn't even know if there's a 3rd base down. And you can see that Wellmu's decision making here, you know, it's not so much based on information as it is based on an estimation of the situation that he's in. He's going to come out here. But like I said, that glaive upgrade being late is actually so vital. Why is that so vital here? Because he doesn't want to push till glaives is done. Normally, you hit a very crisp glaive timing. Why is that important? Because that scouts for you as well as pressuring the Zerg, and it's important to get to the Zerg side of the map early enough to see an all-in coming, but also early enough to avoid any roaches and stay in a threatening position. This map especially, it's really frightening on because there's only this one narrow corridor. You ideally want to get to a position like here, so if the Zerg starts pushing, you can shade up here. You can shade down here, so you can move around into non-committal positions where you force a lot of units to be at home, where you potentially punish the Zerg really hard, where you can delay a timing attack a really long time. But the moment Wellmu goes in here, yes, it was an error. A better player might have cancelled that shade quicker. Maybe Wellmu, just wasn't looking, but he had so little time to react. The thing is, if he did cancel those shades, these shades would still have to just defend at home, which would still be a little bit awkward, right? It wouldn't be the end of the world, but it would be a bit awkward. If he had these adepts out here 30 seconds earlier, let's go back and let's imagine what this game looks like. So let's imagine these adepts are out here, say at 5 minutes. If he's shading into these bases now, suddenly he's like, whoa, you've got roaches there, and he can send his adepts up here. Oh, you got roaches there, he can send his adepts down here. If he prefers to, he could pull the adepts home. I don't think that's what any Protoss player would want to do in this scenario, but I'll let higher level Protoss players than me answer that, but to be honest, I think it's something where you'd always want to be doing that because the roaches aren't mobile, and the way this attack functions for Zerg, just 7 roaches. There's not that many roaches, just 7. And the rest is just mass speedlings. The roaches will beat the adepts. The roaches will do a really good trade against them, like they'll fight evenly. But the Zerglings, they are not good versus glaive adepts, especially when you get, what is this, 10? This is 10 adepts with attack speed. 10 adepts, do you know how many Zerglings you need to fight that? You need like 70 Zerglings. Like you need an insane Zergling count. If these adepts ever get into a choke point, if they get on your ramp behind the minerals, you're just not going to kill them with Zerglings. You're going to lose everything. So suddenly we see just how delaying the Protoss opens up opportunities for these attacks to do damage. The Adepts shade in, and losing basically all of his investment up to this point is absolutely disastrous. Takes way too much damage here. DTs come out. Definitely a bit of an unfortunate game for Wellmu. I'm sure he felt very unlucky with that Adept shade. But one now where he just can't secure that third, and there's just such a swarm of Zerg coming across the map. So very well played here by True. And everything kind of stemming forward from him throwing off the Protoss build. So the Protoss build wasn't as crisp as it should have been. Protoss player has opportunities to make mistakes, and the Protoss player also doesn't have the information ahead of time about these sort of attacks coming. He doesn't have the time to kind of mentally prepare himself. It all relies on him having these super clutch reactions on the fly. All right. So, guys, I do want you to start shouting out questions in chat. I'm going to answer them as we go. We are going to look at a few more replays and look at some other situations with how this plays out. But obviously, I've got to load up other replays. So start shouting out questions in chat. We are sticking to that quicker format for today. So far, I think one of the big points as well is just the fact that even when he's not going to go for a hatch block, True loves this 14 hatch, and it's just such a sick thing to do. So yeah, it's so sick because it denies that ability for Protoss to kind of dictate the pace of the game and put pressure on. If you guys saw Dark versus Hero yesterday, sorry, not yesterday, like a week or so ago in one of the Korean leagues, I think it was GSL, Hero basically just pylon blocked him early, and Dark just fell apart and just threw these all-ins at him, which were quite obvious because, Hero is like, well, I'm denying your bases for so long. Let's just play really safe against an all-in, and just blocks it. And he was just all over Dark. And True here is kind of like, look, I'm never going to give you the opportunity to put the pressure on me because I already understand how hard the situation is for me in this matchup or for my race specifically. And he's like, I'm going to just make sure I throw everything at you to put the pressure on you. And that's True's style in a nutshell. Forces opponents to make mistakes, does it exceptionally well. So there's a few different replays I was thinking of looking at. I just realized we can't necessarily look at all of them, but let's very quickly look at Sejong Station versus Wellmu, where the hatch block actually gets denied. Exact same build order, but it gets denied. And it's kind of interesting because you get to see, well, how does this play out if that doesn't work out? Is this all in? Does he need the hatch block to happen? So once again, he's gone 14 hatch, sends a drone out nice and early, and he's extractor tricked up to 15 drones at home. And it looks like, yeah, he did actually, okay, so he did go to 17 drones. It looks like it was only one game, I think, where he tried to, no, he actually, oh, okay, big mistake. Okay, I was correct. I was thinking, like, did I watch these replays wrong yesterday? So check this out. Starts 2 more drones at home, and comes in with the drone, and then he's like, oh wait, I can do this. Cancels the 2 drones, goes to put the hatchery down, and it gets blocked, and he's like, oh, god damn it. And that's really bad. That's really bad for True. So that's really cute though, that he likes to start those drones, and then if he sees the opportunity to block, he's like, oh bam, cancel them and get it. Because he knows that if he does get the hatchery down, he's not going to be able to spend that lava very well anyway, because he's got to get the pool and gas very soon afterwards, or he's open to counter pressure. So combined with the fact that, you know, he's got to build the pool, he's got to build the gas, he's like, nah, you know what? I can just cancel those 2 lava, get the hatchery down faster. But this time, if you cancel it and don't get the hatch down, then that's pretty massive. So something which you could do if you try to do this yourself is hotkey those two eggs. So without looking away, you can just press the hotkey, press escape to cancel them both, you know, press escape, put the hatchery down. But nonetheless, True's like, okay, we just have to play a normal game from here. So let's fast forward and let's look at how he does it. Like I said, gas and then pool, drone, 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 drone. In this case, he goes straight for a 3rd base trying to recover. And I think that's partly because he cancelled those 2 eggs. He says to himself, oh crap, how am I going to spend my money? And he says, let's just put a faster 3rd hatch down and maybe that'll help me catch up. Is this actually the most efficient way to do it? I'm not really sure, because this is going to slow down his queens a lot. He's going to save money for queens in a moment. For the moment, he's just been non-stop building drones. He's actually not building queens at all yet. So this is very curious. And then he starts Zergling speed, and now he says, look, I've got enough drones, let's start those queens. Queen at the natural, 4 Zerglings, because he knows he needs to defend the counterattack, and then a queen in the main as well. And once again getting supply blocked on 28. So if there's one thing which we can see True really needed to fix in his execution throughout this tournament, it was the supply blocks on 28, because he hit them repeatedly. I think this time it wasn't as big, and he was kind of waiting for the hatchery to finish. But it definitely was slowing him down in almost every game he did this build. And I wonder if that's just something which he's calculated as saying, because I need to get out the Zerglings and Queens right then, because he knows the exact timing this counter pressure hits, maybe he's saying that's worth it. My inclination, though, is to say he could squeeze that Overlord in a little bit earlier and have a slightly more efficient opening. But nonetheless, True basically just macros on up. And what we see here is really cool as well, which is True playing that metagame. Remember, his entire build, putting down the fast hatch so the pros can't deny it, that's playing the metagame. It's playing to the strategies that are currently happening. But not only that, he's hatch blocking. He's saying Protoss have these tightly refined build orders. They kind of rely on everything happening in a set order which they control. Let's disrupt that. Let's throw it off. And now he also says, you know what, something? Protoss players respect Zergling speed. Every game they come across with an Adept or two, then they leave right around 3 minutes 30 when a hatch gas pool Zergling speed kicks in, and the Adepts could be surrounded. He says, well, if they leave and they don't ever come back until the later Adept timing, you know what? I don't think I need Zergling speed. And in multiple games, he actually cancels his Zergling speed and starts Overlord speed instead. So in this game, if we go back to it, we can go back about a minute. Check it out, Zergling speed's upgrading. Adept comes in. Adept is getting chased away. He's like making sure the Shade doesn't commit. Okay, Shade doesn't commit. Bam, cancel. Let's go. Come on, don't make me look dumb. There we go. Cancel, starts Overlord speed instead. And this is True saying, I need to get scouting info, but I'm a little bit behind. I'm in a bit of an awkward position. I need to cut a corner here. And even though this is a little bit risky, I think this will work out. And in this game, he's actually going up to 6 queens he will go up to. And he's just going to say, queens are generically pretty good at defending against everything. Let's scout with Overlord speed and get in there and get some information on what's going on. So his Overlord's going to come in, see what's happening. Unfortunately for him, he's not prepared for the Oracle, but does a very quick drone pull. Only loses 5 drones in mining time. Still pretty good for Wellmu, but not as bad as it could have been for True. And this Oracle here from Wellmu, unfortunately miscontrolled. Because, I mean, let's face it, True is behind. from the early game. If that Oracle came in and hit this natural, True would have taken massive damage. It would have been so bad. But Wellmu wasn't watching, goes for the third base, and only picks up a few more drones instead. Also should have probably focused those drones as they ran away rather than the queens. And from here, True stabilizes and he plays a somewhat normal game. Now, this is the one game where True adjusts. Normally, he always goes for a big Roach Ling or a big Ling Bane aggression. And he says, I'm just going to hit a big timing on your third base before it's fully established, like around this time, either crash in with Ling Bane, crash in with a Roach Ling, and I'm going to overwhelm it and kill it. In this game, he says, I'm too far behind. I already had to skip Zergling speed, and I've invested in Overlord speed. I've just got to try and catch up in the drone count. These oracles are running around killing my workers. I've built extra queens, which aren't aggressive units at all. He says, look, we just can't fight with that same sort of timing. But he still wants to bring the hurt to Protoss. He still wants to find mistakes. And that's why we're going to see him go for fast fourth base, melee upgrade, and he's going to get a Baneling Nest and set up for some Ling Bane drops. So he's playing a Ling Bane style, just mass Ling Bane, but he's doing it in a very unique way where he wants to be dropping these Banelings all over the place. Turns out that he's up against a Stalker Sentry push, and because he's gone Overlord speed, and it's True we're talking about, he's actually always really well set up to deal with Sentry pushes with any sort of mass Zergling style that he plays, which is 90% of his games, because he can just drop Banelings on top, and suddenly the force fields aren't as effective. The Protoss players fighting against this need to recognize what they're up against and force field in a very specific pattern, which they often fail to do. But we see here, there's the chance if the Protoss player isn't looking for True to do epic damage, and this happens over and over and again in his games. Bam! Oh, so gross, man. So beautiful. And then we see he engages on the front, drops Banelings right in the middle of all these units and just tears everything to shreds. Now, let's look at that engage one more time from the Protoss perspective, because I know there's players out there who are asking, how the hell do you win this fight? It's very difficult, but I do think Wellmu had the potential to win this fight. One thing is his oracles had already used up a little bit too much of their energy. You want a lot of energy saved up on these oracles, and especially if you can put down some status traps, it is killer. Against Ling Bane, with this style, there's no ranged units for the Zerg to snipe down those traps, and you've got so much range damage, it's hard for them to set off the traps with just 1 or 2 Zerglings. They've usually got to send in a pack to set them off. Combine that with the Oracle Beam attack, which wrecks Ling Bane, that's amazing. But remember, those drops are the big threat. So something you've got to always respect is those. And instead of doing force fields around your army and donutting yourself in this tight little cramped space, you need to look at the architecture of the map and you need to say, where can I cut off the Zerglings from entering so that I then can just spread out without worrying about so many Zerglings surrounding my army at once. And it's never ideal. I mean, this is definitely, a good composition from True to deal with it. But let's think about it. Force field, force field. 2 force fields there, maybe a third one because Zerglings are very skinny, is going to block that off. That's going to be great. What about force field, force field, force field, force field? So about 6 force fields is going to make it so Zerglings can only run in the north side, and that's going to be fantastic. So that allows Wellmu to spread. He could spread units up here, 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 here. He'd have much more area to spread out and minimize those Baneling hits. Likewise, it would be easier for him to focus fire on the Overlords before they drop the Banelings. However, of course, Wellmu isn't mentally prepared for this. It's very hard to, to recognize that this is something you have to do when it's kind of quite outside of the meta for people to be dropping Banelings on top of armies. Something we don't see as often, but we see here, he kind of had the pullback donut around the army, needed those force fields to be down just a little bit more decisively. Things might have ended up differently. But instead, donuts around the army, goodbye all of the sentries, and the Stalkers themselves take massive shields damage as well. And from there, without the sentries there to keep regenerating energy and throw down follow-up force fields, it's going to be really difficult. So Wellmu could have done that, where as the army is coming in, let's take a look at it one more time. And right at this moment, he's got to be so clutch, because keep in mind, he barely gets any time to react. force field, and then if the Zerg keeps committing around, that's when you throw the second wave of force fields on the back, but only after some of the Zerg units have come forward, and you really try to focus fire with some of your units and just shoot down this Overlord. Because his units are busy move commanding, that Overlord gets right on top, doesn't focus fire it in time, and everything goes awry very quickly. It definitely takes a high level of micro, but it is something I think Wellmu had the potential to win here, because the opening did go really well his way. And keep in mind, he killed a good 15 workers or so with his oracles throughout the entire early game, which is plenty of damage. But True here, great drop damage on the counter attack, really limiting the warp-in reinforcement. And of course, just great Baneling drops as well. So very well played by True. That's it. The game pretty much ends from there. It goes on for another minute or two with Wellmu trying to grab it. But anyway, let's answer some questions now. Let's take a look at those. All right, guys. So any good ones? And while we look at those, I'll show one or two other replays while we answer the questions. All right, guys. So use that x5_pig tag and let's have a look. Now, would this build work against Terran, says Diamond Tie? Hatch block against Terran. Not nearly as much, because the Terran can always just build the command center next to the hatchery and then float it there. So hatch block in general, not that good against Terran. However, going for the very fast, 15 hatchery is something we did see him use on the gold base on Dasan Station in order to just get up Queens and Lings and Banes very early. And, obviously that makes sense with a gold base to rush your hatchery. So, what is another good question? ICB has a really good question. He says, Pig, you keep saying that it throws off the Protoss's build to do all this weird stuff. But wouldn't it also throw off True's build orders and so on? Wouldn't it throw off his own internal rhythm if he's in these chaotic situations? What you've got to remember is, yes, it does. True's never going to be like the most refined, beautiful player out there. Like, because he embraces these chaotic situations, though, he's encountered them so many more times than his opponent. The difference is he's practiced this build 100 times. The players only ever get to practice against it when they're playing against him. So the big difference here for True, and let me show in game while we look at this. Whoops, wrong one. There we go. So the big difference here for True is. Sorry, my brain's a little bit slow today. So even though it does definitely make his builds a little bit harder to be crisp and tight and all that sort of stuff, it's something where he's encountered the situation more than his opponent. So number one, he has more experience. Therefore, he understands the situation better. He knows the situation better. But not only that, he's had time to think about all the different things that it forces and understand the theory of the situation better. He will understand so many different options. And because of that, he can choose the right one for the specific scenario. He can weigh things up so much better, whereas opponents are like, oh god, my hatchery is blocked, my Nexus is blocked, like, what do I do from here? What the hell do I do? And it just becomes much harder as them to, in the heat of battle with less experience, to weigh all of that up. Whereas for him, it's much easier to make the right decision, simply through, he's practiced it more, he's experienced with it, and also because he's very aggressive, he doesn't need to make as complex calculations. This build here, this game, is a perfect example of a game where things were not going True's way, and True recognizes it and makes a clutch gamble. Let's take a look. So very quickly, he got surprised by 2-gate Adept before Nexus, and his whole main base has had to evacuate. He's on only 18, like he's had to build all these Zerglings, his economy is down 10 workers, and he realizes, like, it's just taken too long to deal with these Adepts. And True just starts to realize, like, he's down shit creek, he doesn't have a paddle, and he realizes that he needs to get his hands dirty, and he just says, you know what, I know there's like there's 4 Adepts on my side of the map, I'm going to leave 6 Zerglings at home, and I'm just going to go all in. Like, not even all in, but like commit to a huge counter pressure. And he just sends most of his Zerglings across, even while the Adepts are in his base still. And this means he does still lose an extra drone or two. It almost gets out of control here. But bam, catches Wellmu without a unit up in the gate. And obviously this was definitely Wellmu's mistake, but if there's one thing True's good at capitalizing on, it's his opponent's mistakes. And he just wins this game outright. And this sort of thing happened a lot during this tournament, where he found himself in a bad position. He quickly made that clutch call to counterattack. We saw it in that Frozen Temple game, where the DTs were out. He had no lair, he had no spores, and he was like, oh shit. And he flanked around the map with his Zerglings. He ran past the DTs with his Roaches, and still killed the third base while defending at home. So, you know, just True's kind of clutch decision making, knowing when to hit and knowing that he's got to commit to these attacks is something which has just got him so much success in WCS Summer. You heard it time and time again from his opponents where they said, I'm really upset, I played really bad. And I'm sure all the people say, oh, you know, these cocky guys saying they played bad or something like that, but it's true. You feel like you played like crap when you play against someone who never gives you an opportunity to get in your rhythm. MC built a career off this. He built a career off killing people before they could get to the point of the game they wanted to get to. You know, Forges be damned in PvT. Remember MC and HOTS even, where he'd just be like, oh yeah, it's like 16 minutes into a game, I better put down my double Forge. You'd be like, what? Because he'd just kill people and he'd be so aggressive and he'd always find a way to do that. And this is a great way to play tournaments as long as you understand how to use those builds and how to work your way through the kind of labyrinth of transitions that happen from these crazy openings. iCup says, Pig, would Wellmu metagame versus this by just going Pylon Nexus? You know, that's kind of dangerous, I guess, you know, because you're not sure what else True might throw out. He doesn't actually do that in this series, but could he do that? Potentially, he could get a Nexus down slightly faster. What we saw, though, was just bringing 2 probes down to the natural, and Harstem did this as well in his series when he saw the drone coming, and just using both of them to block the hatch block worked completely fine. That's what happened on Sejong Station, and we saw, like I said, I really feel like Wellmu could have picked up that game quite easily, even though True did win it. So definitely making sure your Nexus doesn't get blocked just by pulling the second probe very quickly and microing your probes well is the correct counter to the block as Protoss. But it's still something where it, you know, on Frost and this map, for instance, he still goes for that 14 hatch in order to deny the chance for the Protoss to start kind of putting him on the back foot with pylon blocks and that sort of stuff. Are there any adjustments needed to compensate for later speedlings, says Alexei? It's definitely something where you just need to make sure you're well positioned with your Zerglings and you need to make sure you've got more of them than you would need. We see that almost by default, True, after a hatch block, ends up building 14 Zerglings. Usually that's against 2-gate or if he's seen, you know, multiple gateway units, because he knows he needs plenty of Zerglings against those first 2 Adepts, because he's not going to have speed and he's going to need to split the Zerglings in half to help the Queen at the front, half to chase them into the shade into the main base. So having a few more Zerglings against the initial wave is something True normally does. And because, like we said, those Protoss players are respecting the shade, he metagames there, and True says, you're going to respect that I could surround you with Speedlings. These aren't Glaive Adepts. It's not 8 or 10 Adepts. You need to go home. And he often just cuts at 14 Speedlings. So even when we saw Wellmu go up to 4 Adepts, there were still only 14 Speedlings, which is not really the ideal count to deal with it. Likewise, in some of his games, he built like the 10, 12 Zerglings and then just cancelled Zergling speed. And he's definitely not safe against like 4 or 6 Adepts diving in there. So this is something which has got to be so frustrating for Protoss players after they play True to look at those replays and be like, man, he just cancels Zergling speed. Like I would never do it in a game, but if I made a bunch of Adepts and just went with this really random like old school pressure, it could work here. And that's where you see real understanding of StarCraft, where True says there's a hole here. People aren't punishing this. I don't actually need the safety at this point because it's just so obscene in the current state of how people are playing for them to go for that pressure. Therefore, I don't need to play safe against it. People just aren't going to do it. Cool Bum says, who really wins eco-wise if both the Protoss and the Zerg end up successfully blocking each other's natural? I don't know, man. I have no idea. I'm sure there's many crazy ways that play out. With this build, you will never get your natural blocked as True because your natural goes down first. It's 3 hatch before pool. It's 15 hatch and then 14 hatch on your natural and then 15 hatch on their natural. So there's no way for them to block your hatchery in time. If that happened, I have no idea. So anyway, guys, we've done a bit longer than we meant to today, but I appreciate you guys hanging out. Don't forget that Icy Fire is on this week and it's on the test map. If you guys haven't played the test map, go and play it. It's amazing. So just submit your replays according to the link if you're watching on YouTube down below in the description. If you're watching on Twitch, the link is, or the email to submit those is in chat. So yeah, go hop on, play some games on the test map. You know, just play some customs against someone, a friend, whoever. Send them in for Icy Fire next week. So yeah, guys, that's all for now. Don't forget to hug a watermelon, kick a Roros, and of course, punch a watermelon to the moon. I'll catch you guys next time. Goodbye and good night.